Be cool. Everything is going to work out well. The USA will be bigger and better than ever before.
No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents. They wouldn't have done it. It's our declaration of economic independence. We will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%.
So in April 2025, the global economy didn't just blink, it shook. The world's two largest powers, the United States and China, took their long-standing trade feud to an entirely new level. A sweeping wave of tariffs shocked international markets, sent the stock market into a tailspin, and redrew the lines of global alliances. This isn't just about economics anymore, it's about power, politics, and the future of the world's trading system. So let me tell you how everything went down, how a battle over trade transformed into a global shift in power that the world wasn't ready for. Understand how we got here, we have to rewind. The tensions between the US and China didn't start overnight. They've been simmering for decades, over intellectual property theft, trade imbalances, restricted market access, and accusations of unfair subsidies. For years, the US accused China of playing by its own rules while taking full advantage of global trade. On the other side, China claimed the US was using economic pressure to suppress its rise. Flash forward to 2025, and the fire finally explodes. Here's how the tariff war escalated. Day by day, April 2, 2025, President Donald Trump announces a sweeping 10% tariff on all imports, not just from China, but from every country. His reasoning? To fix what he called decades of bleeding trade deficits and protect American manufacturing. April 3, 2025, China wastes no time. A 34% tariff is slapped on all U.S. goods effective April 10th. The message is clear, we're not backing down. April 7, 2025, Trump doubles down. He threatens an additional 50% tariff on Chinese imports, escalating the standoff even further. April 9, 2025, China strikes back, again. Tariffs on U.S. goods rise to a staggering cumulative rate of 84%. That very same day, Trump pulls the trigger, 125% tariffs on all Chinese imports, accusing China of having no respect for the global market. And a tit-for-tat spiral had begun, with no off-ramp in sight. Analysis of the tariff war. Now, let's break down what these tariffs actually looked like, and why they hit so hard. Send to United States targeted critical sectors, steel, aluminum, electronics, and everyday consumer goods. These weren't random, they were strategic, designed to protect domestic industries and pressure China's manufacturing base. But China didn't just absorb the hit, it countered with equal force, hammering U.S. agriculture, automobiles, and tech. Soybeans, pork, electric vehicles all suddenly became much more expensive to export. So, what was the logic behind this economic warfare? From the U.S. side, the administration claimed the tariffs were a long overdue correction. They argued that China's unfair trade practices, like forced technology transfers and IP theft, had cost the U.S. billions. This was their way of leveling the playing field and shrinking the trade deficit. From China's side, Beijing called the tariffs pure protectionism, a violation of global trade rules. Their response? Retaliation, framed as self-defense. They said if the U.S. wanted a trade war, China would match fire with fire. In reality, both sides were playing a dangerous game, one where no one wins and everyone pays. Shifting global power dynamics. And as the U.S. and China clashed head-on, the rest of the world watched and adjusted. The economic shockwaves weren't just about who paid more for steel or soybeans. This was about influence, power, and who gets to call the shots in a rapidly changing world. Countries began rethinking their positions. Allies grew uncertain, trade partners grew cautious, and some nations saw opportunity in the chaos. And smaller economies started exploring alternative trade routes. Regional agreements were fast-tracked. Everyone wanted to limit their exposure to both the U.S. and China, but one response stood out. In a rare moment of unity, China, Japan, and South Korea came together to jointly respond to U.S. tariffs. Three of Asia's largest economies, often rivals themselves, suddenly aligned in a message of regional solidarity. This wasn't just an economic move, it was geopolitical. signaled that the global balance of power was shifting, fast. The old model of a US-centric trade system was starting to crack, and new centers of influence were quietly taking shape. Global impact. The fallout wasn't contained to Washington and Beijing. The entire world felt it. April 3, 2025. The Dow Jones crashes, plummeting 1,679 points in a single day. That's nearly a 4% drop, the worst since 2020. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ follow suit, shedding billions in market value within hours. Thai investors panicked. Global markets tumbled. It wasn't just about stocks. It was about fear. Fear that the world's two biggest economies were dragging everyone else into their fight. And they kind of were. In Europe, the response was swift. The EU slapped retaliatory tariffs on $23 billion worth of U.S. goods. Their message? If you come for us, we hit back. Meanwhile, developing economies, already strained by debt, inflation, and fragile supply chains, got caught in the crossfire. Higher import prices, slower exports, trade disruptions. This wasn't just a U.S.-Minuscina issue anymore. It was a global economic mess, and nobody had a playbook for how to clean it up. Want to see the real damage? You don't need to look at charts. Just ask the people caught in the middle. Start with American farmers. When China slapped heavy tariffs on soybeans and pork, it wasn't just a political move, it was personal. Farms across the Midwest saw exports vanish overnight. Prices tanked, storage silos filled with unsold crops. Generational businesses faced bankruptcy. Then there's the auto industry. With China targeting U.S. cars, companies like Ford and Tesla took major hits. Production costs rose, sales dropped. Some even paused their China operations completely, and it wasn't just the U.S. feeling the squeeze. In Europe, steel and aluminum tariffs sent shockwaves through manufacturing. The EU didn't just respond with words, they hit back with billions in tariffs on everything from bourbon to motorcycles. In Asia, countries like Japan and South Korea quickly shifted gears. They began strengthening regional trade deals, fast-tracking pacts that would reduce reliance on both U.S. and Chinese markets. It was economic survival mode. These weren't just isolated reactions. They were part of a global chain reaction. And the message was loud and clear. No one wanted to get caught between two giants again. Behind the headlines, experts were sounding the alarm. Economists warned that this wasn't just a trade spat, it was a slow-moving economic threat. They predicted rising consumer prices, fractured supply chains, and long-term damage to global growth. Some even feared stagflation, slow growth combined with rising inflation, the worst of both worlds. From groceries to gadgets, prices were creeping up. Businesses struggled to secure parts. Shipping costs soared. Global trade, once optimized for speed and scale, was now tangled in politics and red tape, and they weren't wrong. Political analysts had a different concern. They saw this as more than economics. It was about control, a new kind of power struggle, one where tariffs were weapons and supply chains were battlegrounds. To them, the trade war was just one front in a larger conflict, a global contest between two superpowers vying to set the rules of the 21st century. And if the experts were right, this was only the beginning. The U.S.-China tariff war of 2025 didn't just raise prices or rattle markets, it shifted the entire global order. What started as a fight over trade deficits exploded into something much bigger, a clash of ideologies, strategies, and influence. One superpower trying to hold its ground, another rising fast. And in between, the rest of the world, rebuilding alliances, rewriting trade deals, and racing to adapt to a reality where no single country calls all the shots anymore. This is the age of multipolar power, no longer just East versus West, but a global chessboard where every move carries weight. And the truth is, this story's far from over. So stay informed, stay prepared, because the next move in this economic war could change everything. Again.